What's up? This is Chris with Get Optimized, and this presentation's about what we mean by brewing results, specifically when we talk about owned channels and measurable outcomes. And this topic is important for a few reasons. One is we often get questions about how do we reduce our dependency on social media and Meta, especially, and how do we drive more ROI with our marketing? And also, what the heck do you mean by brewing results? It's kind of in our tagline, and we mean a lot of things by that, but this is very much so at the core of it. So this presentation is going to be great if you're struggling with social media. It's going to be great if you're struggling with driving measurable results with your marketing. We're going to give you some great tactics and understanding around what it means to actually brew results for your craft beverage business. There's really two topics that this presentation focuses on. Part one is owned channels, and what the heck do we mean by that? And how do we re-engineer our campaigns to drive measurable outcomes? And that is part two. And you're going to find that by the end of this presentation, you're going to have a great understanding of what each of these means and how to incorporate this stuff into your marketing strategy. Now, before we get into part one, I think we need to set the framework here. And that framework, or set the baseline here with this. And that baseline is kind of the traditional model for especially breweries marketing their business. And this is kind of the we mainly post to social media strategy, which really involves, posting to social, maybe doing a little bit of boost. And then what happens is there's this huge valley between those activities, posting and maybe a little bit of boosting, and then kind of hoping that we eventually get on-site revenue. And there's not really anything going on in between those two activities. And there's problems with that. Right? Those problems being that there's not really measurable performance. We don't really know how good that social post worked, or how well it worked, rather, at driving results. We don't have any control over the algorithm on social media. So one day our post could do really well. It might not do well another day. There's all these trends and different things going on with organic social media algorithmic stuff that we have literally no control over how that stuff works. And we don't really own our following on social media. Anybody who's ever lost their Instagram because they got hacked or something like that, or they transitioned business manager access and they can't get into their social media platforms, they have to start all anew. You know this lesson painfully well because you lose all that following. But there's reasons why we use this strategy, and part of that is that raising awareness and communicating with our target audience, and raising awareness amongst that target audience is relatively easy, right? Like, I don't mean to knock any social media managers out there. I think they do an excellent job. Many of them do. But my point is that you don't need a master's degree to learn how to post and kind of market your business with some social media stuff out there, right? Like, most folks can do this. Many people that are probably watching this can do this or have been doing it. There's ways to do it very, very well, right? But the baseline version is the barriers to entry are pretty low, and that's why we tend to gravitate towards this type of strategy. Now, what we're going to talk about next is like, what's the strategy really should look like, and how do we actually evolve this to be more like a marketing system, more like a funnel, and more of what we can control and depend on for our business. And that starts with owned channels. So what the heck do I mean by owned channels? Well, it's really any channel where you control the data and own the database, specifically of contacts. So think of anything where you could export out those contacts and take them and put them somewhere else, right? And examples of that are email marketing, text message marketing, your website is an example of owned. You really kind of control the environment on your website and the data and tracking that flows through that website. You may have your own app. That could be another example of an owned channel. Your POS system, all the data that flows into that, and the contacts that are there. POS, depending on your system, also connects to email and text and different things as well. So it kind of is related. A CRM, especially for those B2B folks, your CRM like HubSpot or what are the other ones out there? Salesforce is the big traditional example. You probably know what I'm talking about if you know CRM. You have all your contacts in that system, and oftentimes you can run email and different marketing through that system as well. But the point is, for owned, what we're talking about is contacts that you actually have control over. Now, why do we care so much about owned? Well, I'm going to illustrate the value of owned channels with this kind of mini case study here. So let me explain the background. What we did with this campaign is this was a pre-sale on a 4-pack where we sold the 4-pack, and when people came to pick it up, they got like a free 4-ounce beer, right? We pushed this out with meta ads, and we ran an email campaign with this as well. And I'm going to show you kind of the difference in metrics on this campaign. So with meta ads, we spent about $98 and drove 20 orders with that. The revenue on that was about $538. So the number I really care about with this is that return on ad spend number. You see that as 5.38. So what does that even mean? So what return on ad spend is you take your revenue, your value that you drove with the campaign, and divide it by your cost. So if you take 538 divided by 98, you get 5.38. Maybe a few more decimal points, but we rounded up on this one. And that essentially tells us a rate of return on the dollars that we spent. In this case, it's about 5 to 1. So for every dollar we spent in the ad, we returned 5, which is really good for a meta ads campaign. I mean, this was a fantastic campaign as far as ads are concerned. But let's take a look comparatively at the email campaign here. So with email, there's a bit kind of an asterisk around cost, because most email systems, you're not really paying per email that goes out. There's some of them that are like that, but imagine like your MailChimp, your normal kind of newsletter system, you're probably just paying a flat monthly fee on this. But for the purpose of this example, let's assume that flat monthly fee applied to this one campaign. It didn't, because we sent multiple emails a month for this account, but in this case, let's just call it $29, right? Now with that campaign, that one campaign drove 19 orders for about $576 in revenue. So a little bit more revenue there. But look at the return on ad spend. Drastically different. We drove $576 in revenue for $29 cost. And keep in mind that $29 cost is actually lower than that because there was more campaigns that went out, right? But even at $29, a 19, almost 20 to 1 return on email is fantastic. And that's my point about owned. This is a perfect example of how an owned channel performs at a much more efficient rate than other channels. I'll quick tangent here. I'm not saying don't do ads, right? And if you followed anything we're doing with Get Optimized, we do a lot of advertising. We lean on that heavily in some cases. What I'm saying here is that your owned channels are probably the most valuable, highest ROI driving channels that you have. And we see these kind of results time and time again with different email campaigns that we're running, different texts and apps and that kind of stuff too. Now, speaking of apps, I want to make a point here about other than just email, right? Like there's more than that when we think about owned. And I'm sharing some data from my friends at Tapwise. Ross over there is an awesome dude. And I talked to him about what we're doing with owned channels. And I would love to see some of the data that he has put together with some of his clients, because I think the app environment is actually another good example of owned. And it's a really good example, to use that word again, of how owned is evolving, right? Like if we think owned traditional, just straight up contacts, email, maybe direct mail, text messages, that's what we always think about. But an app, especially if you build your own app, is an example of owned, because you actually control the data in that environment. You can export that data. You can transfer that data to a different app environment. You control the messaging, the design, everything is yours in there. It's not like a third party app like Instagram or even other kind of beer apps that are out there. I won't name them. You probably know what I'm talking about, right? The one where everybody rates stuff on there. If you were to push messaging out through that kind of system, you don't actually own your contacts there, your connections. None of that is something you could export and use. Or you don't really control that environment and the design of that anyway. So if you build your own app, this is a place where you can actually drive performance too. And again, I think Tapwise has done an excellent job here. Just looking at some of the numbers here, they're driving monthly visits through app rewards and offers. They're driving monthly and annual revenue from app membership programs. I mean, look at that example, that third example there in particular. $2,600 annual average revenue from membership programs that are controlled and run through the app. Some of these apps are even doing like $17,000 a year. So it's just another case here where owned channels can help you drive real revenue and consistent revenue outside of just our normal traditional, I call them rented spaces like social media and the like. Now, part 2 of this process is about measurable outcomes, right? Like owned, we talked about. So that's an important thing. But really, even to maximize owned and to see the value in owned, you have to be able to measure performance. And it's not just with owned, right? If you're running ads, doing any kind of marketing out there, being able to measure how that stuff is working is the second, column in this idea of actually bringing results and scaling your marketing programs for your brewery or other craft beer business. So let's talk about what that even means. So here's some examples of what I mean by measurable outcomes. So if you're trying to sell more beer, some measurable outcomes for you with that could potentially be like online pre-orders. You could do like an online glass and 4-pack combo. We did this a few different times over the last couple of months. Most recently here at the time of this recording, we did something for St. Patrick's Day where we sold a specialty glass. There was a St. Patrick's Day glass, a 4-pack that came with that glass. And the idea was that somebody came in to pick up that glass during St. Patrick's Day weekend, right? So that's something that could be an example of a measurable outcome, that online sale of that combo. Another opportunity here that isn't necessarily revenue is like a downloadable coupon, like revenue, e-commerce revenue is what I mean. Like a downloadable coupon. So let's say you do something where, hey, you get a 50% off a food item when you buy a pint. All you gotta do is submit your email and we're gonna send you that downloadable coupon. That email transaction, somebody entering their contact information, that's something you can measure. And I would count that as a measurable objective, kind of with the idea down the road of selling that beer. The next step with that would be, okay, they're downloading this coupon. Now we've got to track that coupon redemption in our POS. And you do that with the easiest way to do it is to have like a custom punch in your POS. So when somebody shows up and shows that coupon, you say, oh yeah, that was the promo coupon XYZ, whatever you're running that for. And then you can run reporting based on that coupon usage out of your POS. Other examples here, maybe with a different objective, is like more foot traffic. We want more people to come into the tap room. Well, what about paid event tickets? Sell your event ticket through like an Eventbrite or your website or something like that, and sell the entry into the event. And, I think we naturally think of like cover charge for this, and maybe you're averse to just charging a cover for something, especially if you don't know how that's going to go. Well, here's my caveat to that. Sell beer with it. Maybe part of that entry includes their first pour, right? As they show up. So that way they're getting value out of it. You're selling your product there, and it's all online initially. There's that transaction. Other examples of foot traffic stuff is maybe, I just mentioned that, the event plus pour. Or heck, do a free registration. At least have some place where somebody could say, yeah, I'm interested in coming. Let me RSVP for that event. Ways that we juice this up with some of our campaigns is we'll offer we'll recommend that breweries offer a free raffle entry with event registration. And what that looks like is you you offer the free registration like Eventbrite, right? And then everybody who enters, or excuse me, RSVPs, they are going to get entry into a raffle for a gift card or a merch item or something like that on site. You got to be on site to win. We're going to announce the winner of the raffle during the event. So definitely be here. And like, okay, that's enough of a carrot to dangle for someone to say, okay, I'll register for that event. What I really love about the free event registration system is that now you've got a level of commitment from somebody. Compare that to you just posting on social media and saying, hey, we have this event coming up in 2 weeks. Even if you amplified that message, you boosted it or you ran an ad for it, you don't really know how many people are going to show up to this event. Even with a free registration, the notch from just somebody seeing it and them registering, the commitment level is so much more if they've registered for the event. And as humans, we are more likely to show up for stuff where we've said, oh yeah, I'll be there. I put my name down. Our minds are just wired that way, right? If we see it, we don't register, then we're a lot less likely to show up. We're extremely likely to show up if we paid something, even if it's a nominal amount, like, $5 or $10 to get that event registration in that poor combo. The level of commitment is much, much, much higher. And this actually allows you to gauge event attendance way ahead of time. And you can make the call to maybe cancel the event and save yourself some money if you're really having a hard time getting people to register for it. Or you can say, this thing blew it out of the water. I need to bring an extra staff member here instead of just getting overloaded and killing yourself on site. You could make those kind of decisions if you're tracking that stuff. And that's kind of the overall point with this, is that all of these tactics I've talked about, there's an online transaction that takes place. Even if it's free, right? They've just done the free event registration or the coupon download. Somebody is giving you their contact information in that case. Or in some cases, maybe they've purchased something. In marketing speak, we call this a conversion. And that word is extremely important because we want to track conversions with everything we do. With email marketing, with advertising. So why do we care about tracking conversions? Well, the conversion allows us to analyze performance from our marketing. And the thing we really care about analyzing is return on ad spend. But there's other metrics that are important here too, like cost per conversion and conversion value. Let me kind of break those down in reverse order. Conversion value is the value that was tied to that conversion. So traditional thing to think of is e-commerce. So if they bought something for $20, that's a conversion worth $20 in conversion value. Okay. Now, the cost per conversion number is how much it costs us to get that conversion. So how much ad spend do we have to spend in order to get one conversion? And that metric can help us gauge like how effective our ad campaigns are. It can help us, especially if we're comparing metrics between ads or targets. If it's much more efficient spend-wise to target a certain group or to run a certain ad, and it's driving conversions more affordably, we want to know that as marketers because we want to spend more money there, right? That's why that number matters. And a return on ad spend number I talked about earlier, but that allows us to see like, all right, are we profitable in terms of ads? Well, it's not necessarily profit. I'll make a caveat here. Return on ad spend is not ROI. It's not profitability because you have fixed costs as well with stuff. And you have to take that into account. But return on ad spend shows us a ratio between how much we're spending and how much we're returning. A couple of examples for you to think about here. So we ran a pre-sale campaign where we sold a 4-pack of this barrel-aged beer, specialty beer, and we did this all online. Now, with our ad metrics, we were able to see, okay, we spent, during this like small time period, we spent $41, drove 8 purchases for about $164 in conversion value. So in actual e-commerce revenue. So our cost per purchase there was about $5. So $5 per item. And our return on ad spend was 4.01. So 4 to 1. So for every dollar we were spending, we were getting $4 back on that. And that actually doesn't take into account on-site revenue. So if we were going to blow out this data even further, we'd say, okay, because what we did with this pre-order is they had to come into the tap room to pick it up. And we offered, I think we did like a free sample or a free pour of the beer there. And some of those people are going to drink when they're on site. So there's this opportunity for on-site revenue with this stuff. What we could do is say, well, let's pull the data on those orders where this specific beer was picked up, look at those tabs, and then say, all right, let's pull that revenue in and compare that to our ad spend. And we'd probably see that return on ad spend number is even greater in that case. Another example here of one where there wasn't revenue involved, we ran a campaign driving people to a Bills backers list sign up. And if you're not familiar with Bills backers, what that means is there's breweries and bars out there that become Bills, like Buffalo Bills, the football team. They're like officially branded Bills backers locations. Well, we ran a campaign to Bills fans, asking them to come onto the website and say, hey, sign up to be aware of all of the Bills happenings going on at this particular location. Now, this ad campaign, we spent about $110. We drove 12 leads for about $9 per lead. And when I look at those numbers, I actually don't like those numbers. They're not that good. And the reason I'm sharing this example is because sometimes you're not going to get the results you want, or they're not going to be as efficient as you want. When I see $9 per lead on just an email sign up, that's way too high. We need to look at that ad campaign and make some decisions on maybe we need to adjust that and create efficiency with our targeting, our ad collateral, or our landing page or something. Or we need to say, okay, it's too expensive to run this campaign. It's not worth it, because if we're going to drive these in for $9 a head, maybe that's not worth it to do this. But without that data, without those conversions being tracked, we have no idea how well that's working. And that's the point here, is to have that measurable piece with this stuff. Now, let's look at some examples of actually evaluating return on ad spend where there isn't conversion value involved. Kind of like that Bills backers thing I talked about a second ago. But this is going to be a little bit different, and I think it's going to be enlightening in more ways. So in this example, we have a campaign we ran for a coupon download. So we push people to a landing page using ads where they could get a buy one, get one pint coupon. And the idea was that they brought that into the tap room and they used it, right? So we did like I said, landing page, meta ads. We did some emails with this too. Overall, we spent about $150 in ad spend, drove 120 coupon downloads. Now the question is, did this actually help us drive more revenue in the tap room, and how much? Well, think back to what I was saying about the POS system earlier, where you have to have a punch in that system so that we can pull that data. And what we found after looking at that data was that 25 coupons were redeemed. So right away we know our redemption rate is about 20%, because we got 120 downloaded. So that's a number we want to set aside for later and compare to other campaigns we run like this. Maybe there are certain coupons that people are really pumped about versus others, right? But when we ran the reporting out of the POS, we saw that there were $800 worth of ticket revenue, right? Order revenue associated with orders that used that coupon. So let's take that $800 and compare that to our $150 in ad spend. And our return on ad spend number there is about 5.33. So you take 800 divided by 150, it's about 5, right? So 5-to-1 return on ad spend. Again, that's not profitability, but still 5-to-1 return on ad spend, pretty good for a campaign like this. And we're able to see, okay, we ran this campaign, we got coupons downloaded. Did it actually work? Were we ahead on the marketing spend with this? And in this case, we were, and it's all because we were tracking things at the ad level, tracking conversions on the coupon download, and then looking at the POS reporting based on that coupon. And what eventually this does, if you think about your model here, so let's zoom back out, and let's think about our 2 points here: owned channels and measurable outcomes. And also think about that original model I talked about the, kind of post and hope model. When we change that model to include owned and we change it to include measurable outcomes, it looks a lot different. A new model utilizes both advertising and owned channels to drive measurable business outcomes like sales, leads, event registrations, and maybe even more stuff if you get creative. Right? Those ads push to product or landing pages, and on those product or landing pages, we're doing beer pre-sales, we're selling merchandise, we're doing coupon downloads and registrations, we're doing event registrations, maybe we're pushing a membership program. There's some kind of online digital environment where we're capturing contact data or we're selling something at that time. And that's actually a really key point here, is that whatever you're doing, even if you're selling something or just pushing people to opt in for something, that action fuels owned channels. All those people become part of your email list, your SMS list. Maybe part of your opt-in funnel is them signing up for the app. So now they become app users. And then we can do things like newsletters, blasts, SMS message pushes, app push notifications. And I already told you about the value of owned channels. So all this stuff, even advertising, as it pushes through this funnel, is actually growing your owned channels and increasing that asset for you and that marketing system for you. Sales, especially, also like online sales, e-commerce stuff like beer pre-sales, merchandise, that kind of stuff, they actually present an opportunity for revenue in different ways. So you get that e-commerce revenue, right? And if you set this up properly, somebody has to come in to pick up that e-commerce thing. It could be an event, right? They got to attend the event. Maybe you're doing a pre-sale where they've got to come in and pick up that stuff in the tap room. And once they're in the tap room, there's an opportunity for more on-site revenue. So, worst case scenario, if you're doing some kind of pre-sale or an event system and you break even on that, a 1-to-1 return on ad spend with just the ad and just the event registration revenue, well, don't count yourself out yet, because those people still have to show up. They're going to buy stuff when they're there. You should be upselling and trying to drive more on-site revenue during those things as well. So there's an opportunity for that with this system. But, overall, this system, kind of pulling this all together here for you, is that, what you want to do if you want to build a system that is bring results for you is you want to build a marketing strategy with a foundation on owned channels. I can't stress that enough. Owned channels are very, very important. And you want to engineer your campaigns to drive meaningful business outcomes. So rethink what you're thinking with campaigns. How can we turn this into something where it means something to my business and it's trackable? So think event registration, think online pre-sale, think coupon download. How can we leverage that stuff how can we leverage marketing to actually support our business outcomes instead of just posting about stuff and hoping people decide to come in? How can we engineer our system to be very much related to real business outcomes like sales, event attendance, and those kind of things? Now, you also need to leverage data-driven campaigns. You have to be tracking conversions so that you can quantify marketing value and evaluate your marketing channels, even your owned stuff. You want to make sure that stuff is actually producing for you and be able to compare different campaigns, different kind of coupons that you push out, different events that you're running. All that stuff needs to be trackable. You need to have conversions tied to it so that you can quantify these different marketing activities, and you can use that information to evaluate marketing channels too. So if you've asked yourself the question, should we do TikTok? Should we do Meta? Should we do Reddit ads? Should we do blah, 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 whatever, right? Maybe there's a good reason to try it, but if you're going to try it, make sure you set up some kind of trackable activity so that you can measure the effectiveness of that channel. And then what your marketing strategy becomes is utilizing marketing channels and tactics that fit your marketing strategy and drive performance. Put simply, do more of the stuff that works and less of the stuff that doesn't work, or none of the stuff that doesn't work, and you're going to start to see your marketing scale up. And that's really the way to grow. So if another question you have is, well, how do we make this stuff? How do we make more? We're doing okay right now. How do we make more? Well, you need to be tracking so that you can know where to put your dollars and scale that up. And that's really what we do at Get Optimized is, and why our tagline is marketing that brews results, because we build these kind of systems for breweries. We help you set up the owned channel framework. We help you plan out promotions and activations and events and these kind of things that we think are most likely to work for you, and we work with you to figure that out. You know a lot of things about your brewery too. Go figure, right? This is your bread and butter. This is your daily lives. So we ask you questions like, what have you done that's worked? What do you see around you? What do your customers want? Even if you got a great event that you've been running, how do we optimize the event even further with trackability, with better campaigns and own channels and that kind of stuff? So we help you plan as well. And we run the ad campaigns to help you drive more volume through your owned channels, drive performance to your events and activations and promotions and offers and all that kind of stuff. And, that's what we mean by brewing results as an agency. And I think we do a pretty good job of it. If you'd like to learn more, definitely go check us out at gethoptimized.com. We've got all kinds of great information on there for you, like our podcast. If you're listening to this right now, you're probably on the podcast already, but you can find case studies, you can find examples of our work, you can read our blog, and you can reach out to us if you got questions. And I do hope, finally, I'll end with this, is that I hope you found this educational. If you did, then please share this with somebody you know that you think would get some value out of it too. And don't be afraid to let us know in the comments. We always like a little bit of praise on there. But all right, I appreciate it. Thank you for joining. We'll see you next time. Bye.